I can't really say I'm disappointed about this one because I'm actually not surprised. Hi, welcome back to my channel. And today we are talking about Silver Elite, which I don't have to hold up because I didn't bother purchasing it properly in real tangible form. I got it as an audiobook because I just knew going into this that I probably wasn't going to like it and it was probably going to be a big disappointment. No, I haven't made any notes on this at all. I'm just going in completely blind. Finished it a few hours ago, and I'm just going to rant with no structure. So if that's your kind of video, stick around and hear what I've got to say. Silver Elite is basically the plot of Divergent or the plot of Fourth Wing, which is also very much like Divergent, except with all of the interesting things about those books taken out. Fourth Wing, I have some gripes with the romance and stuff, but for the most part, I enjoyed it and thought it was really fun because of the dragons and because of the big twist at the end. And there was all this really great action, really great drama. It had me in tears and it surprised me quite a lot. And despite its flaws, I found it really enjoyable. So going into this book, even though I didn't have very high hopes for it, I thought at least there might be a really thrilling twist at the end. At least there might be something cool, some kind of commentary in there that will be interesting. However, there was just nothing new and nothing original to be found here. The plot is basically we live in this dystopian version of America. I'm saying dystopian in quotes because I really don't think this is a true dystopia. It kind of uses dystopia as a set dressing rather than actual political commentary or anything of worth. But it's this dystopia in which America is kind of this military dictatorship. It's very fascist. People live in wards, which are kind of like the districts in the Hunger Games, except less interesting and with less culture. And the world has kind of built back up from a period where there was nuclear war, which caused some people to become modified in some way, which basically means they now have superpowers for some reason. Mostly like telepathy and mind related superpowers, not like super strength or metallurgy or anything like that. These mods, these modified people, are kind of labeled as aberrant and they're kind of being genocided by primes, which are like the normal people in this society. And this military dictatorship is all about weeding out the mods and also weeding out mentally ill people for weakness or something like that, which is a bit toxic. But I mean, fascist dictatorships are toxic. Nazi Germany, the most toxic place, one might say. So that's where we're living. That's the setting of the novel. And we meet our main character, Ren, who's not like other girls. She's a mod, but she's like a super powerful mod for reasons that we don't know that will probably come out in later books. And she's just super special, and she's so good at shooting a rifle. And she grew up kind of Eleven and Hopper style, Joel and Ellie style with this uncle of hers. They lived in the Blacklands, which is basically like Mexico, but it's been hit by a nuclear bomb and now it's gone all dark and there's all these mutated animals and plants living there. She lived there as a child for 3 years with her uncle Jim, and he trained her and all her brain stuff, all of this modified stuff. And now they just live this normal life in the wards as ranchers. And she is really good at stuff and she's kind of insufferable. I don't mind like a character that's flawed. And she does have a lot of flaws, like she's reckless and cocky and things like that. But it did make her quite dislikable, especially with the way the narrator kind of read her voice in the audiobook. And I didn't really overly root for her or connect with her at all. She ends up being forcibly recruited into the military and trained to be in the kind of Silver Elite program because someone sees her shooting ability. And this is a problem because she's aberrant, and the military is basically there to kill and genocide aberrants. And so she's now fighting for her enemy. And kind of like how we see Triss and Divergent learning to be a police officer or whatever the fuck they are in Divergent, learning to be in the military by doing all of these cool tasks, or seeing Violet in Fourth Wing doing all these cool tasks with the dragons, having to walk across that narrow bridge or bond with the dragon or learn to fly. It's like that, except a lot more boring. They're just doing normal military drills. It's a bit like Iron Flame. Like they've got this section where they have to learn to resist interrogation, which is something that they do in Iron Flame as well, but just like made more boring and more normal. A couple of dragons would have made this book like way more interesting, honestly. So they just do like normal military drills for like most of the book. And for the first half of that kind of section of the book, she is pretending to be bad actively so that she can be kicked out because she doesn't want to be there, obviously, because she's basically training to be a Nazi that hunts herself, people like her, which is problematic. And obviously, she doesn't like that. She eventually gets on board and starts trying, thank God, because it would have been boring if she kept failing on purpose, because she's just so good that she has to pretend to be bad. She eventually gets on board because she gets the opportunity to kind of spy and work for the resistance and try to bring down this regime from the inside. So she gets something interesting to do. But she still does this in kind of like the most boring way possible because they don't really tell her a whole lot and give her much agency. So she does what she can, but it's not in a way where you're like, I'm starting to like her now. She's cool. She's, using her initiative. She's mostly just doing things that are reckless and annoying. Her leader in this kind of training program is the general's son, and that is the general that like runs the whole country in this military dictatorship. And he's really hot, and she finds him really hot and sexy, and like, oh, this is so annoying because like, ah, he's my enemy. Like he's basically Hitler's son, but God, his eyes are just so blue. And this is kind of insufferable. We get the classic enemies to lovers kind of plotline in the book, very similar to Violet and Xaden or Triss and Four, all the way down to the fact that he has tattoos, honestly. Another thing to note about Ren is that she's had this like childhood friend that she only speaks to in her mind via telepathy, that she knows as Wolf. He knows her as Daisy, and they're kind of best friends, but they've never met each other before. They don't like fully know each other, but they are also really close. Well, big plot twist, which comes very close to the end of the book, even though it's like very predictable and obvious. But this love interest, Cross, his name is, what a name, he turns out to be Wolf. And so once they reach this like lovers part of the arc, they are like very much in love, moving from a state of lust to genuine connection because of this like literal mental connection that they've had their whole lives. And this is also very much just copying Fourth Wing and like Akatar with the whole mental connection thing. How many books are going to steal this and try to pass it off as something original? Is this like really what girls want? Do you want your like boyfriend to have a mental telepathic connection with you at all times? I feel like we need to turn the trope on its head again, kind of Edward and Bella in Twilight style, where he can read everyone's minds except hers, and that's what makes it interesting. That would be really cool. Let's try and steal that one again for the next author that wants to like loosely plagiarize someone else. So yeah, Ran and Cross have this mental connection, which means that it's a great plot device because if they're not in the same room, they can just talk to each other mentally, which is very helpful as a writer because it means you don't need to worry too much about the logistics of where your characters are. And over the course of the book, there's also some like vague twists and turns, and there's a bit of a reveal at the end. But it's not that mind blowing. It's not giving like the Venom and Fourth Wing being real, and how that blows open like so many possibilities for the sequel, and really keeps me reading. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, and it doesn't leave me like desperate to read the next one. Let's put it that way. And overall, this is a really big issue because if I'm going to read a book like this, like Fourth Wing, that's on the light side and kind of loosely romantasy and entertaining, I expect it to be pretty thrilling, to have really good action sequences, to have me like gagged at the drama of it from time to time, the way Fourth Wing did for me. But Silver Elite just didn't do that for me. It didn't surprise me at any twist or turn, really. It wasn't all bad. Like, I think there was sparks of something interesting in there at some points. Like, I thought the idea of the black glands was like a fairly interesting setting, but we don't spend too much time there. I thought that some of the stuff between her and her uncle was really interesting, and I thought the scene where he's executed and she's really devastated and she's trying to fight to save him, I thought that was quite exciting and like heart wrenching. I thought the scene where she killed her classmate or when Libby betrayed her, those moments were rather interesting. But for the most part, it didn't really have that much emotional impact for me. I thought that calling this a dystopia is a bit of an insult to the genre of dystopia, where it's usually very political and has something quite important to say. This book, I said before, it really just uses dystopia as like a set dressing for a smutty novel. It like almost has something to say, and with a lot of like developmental editing, it could have said those things and that could have been a really interesting novel. For example, we're dealing with Ren, who is an aberrant and a mod, having to go over to the side of her enemy undercover and like work in the military, even though that goes against her morals and her worldview. There, she kind of makes friendships with people in the program and also a relationship with Cross. But these people, by like her worldview, are her enemies. Like they are literally committing genocide against her people. It's a bit like a Jew joining the Gestapo undercover. Like, imagine the conflict you would feel, even if you were doing it for the greater good and for the resistance. Having to work with these people and train to hunt your own people and put them in camps, which they literally do in this book. They put them in labor camps or execute them. So, very similar to the Nazis. Imagine that kind of conflict. And then imagine, as Ren does in this book, she starts to form friendships and connections. She grieves for them when they die at the hands of the resistance. And she also starts to see from their point of view, see some problematic things within the resistance she doesn't really like, even though they're technically on her side. And she ends up getting very confused and very conflicted. Like, she wants to bring down the general and she wants to bring down these Nazis basically and these fascists. But whenever they are brought down, she's very uncomfortable about that and has a lot of cognitive dissonance, because even though that's like literally what she's fighting for and that's her goal, the real life impact of that on her emotionally as someone that knows these people and has like grown connections, um, is actually quite complex, and she doesn't feel happy about it. Like, she feels very, conflicted. Those themes are all very interesting and like not too far from the book I'm writing, to be honest. Like, having to work with people you disagree with, connecting with people you disagree with, flaws with the resistance. Like, these are all topics I cover as well. But this just feels totally undermined by like the whole tone of the novel. Like, I feel like the horror of the crimes of this regime is very tell and not show. Like, I would have liked to see more perspective of the victims of this regime and the damage being done, so that I could have connected more with the cause, rather than just being like, oh, well, our main character's aberrant and we don't want her to die, so this must be bad. She tells us that people go to labour camps, but we don't ever really see it. Like, at least in Throne of Glass, where there's also labour camps, we actually see Selena in the labour camps. We hear her first person account of how horrible it was, how she was kind of tortured there. But like in this story, we don't really get any real tangible sense of what a life in a labour camp is like. And we know that they're executing people by firing squad and things like that, but we don't ever get a real sense of like the scale of the destruction, like how many people have they executed. Because at least when we study like Nazi Germany, we do actually have tangible figures. We really study the perspective of victims who survived the camps. I think whenever you read a story about Nazi Germany, non-fiction or fiction, you like get a real sense of the tragedy and just how dark that period of time in history was. But in this book, we don't really get that, which is a shame, because it's clearly trying to take those themes of basically Nazi Germany and put it in this fictional setting, but it just does so kind of poorly. And so the message, which could have been a good message, I guess, is a little bit lost. And the message itself even seems a little bit confused, because like while she's on the side of the resistance at first, by the end of the novel she's kind of turned against them a little bit and is seeing the problematic sides with them. but I don't really see like to what end. Maybe because the series isn't finished. But it kind of seems like she's going to switch and go onto the Nazis' side, which is a bit of a interesting take. It's probably going to reach a point where it's like war is bad and both sides can be bad, which is true and a message that is also in my book that I'm writing. But I think like one side is definitely worse than the other, especially when one side is basically Nazis. Hot take, I know, stunning and brave. You heard it here first, folks. Nazism is bad. I also think that the other main issue, which is the reason why a lot of people like the book, and is a very common trait to all of these similar types of romantasy books, but it's that the romance is very, very shallow, especially at first. We get from basically the moment they meet in real life her musing about how blue his eyes are, how muscly he is, how cool his tattoos are, how sexy he is. And her inner monologue is constantly like, oh, I know he's my enemy, but he's just so annoyingly sexy and I can't resist him. And that pisses me off. I think Violet's inner monologue about Xaden in Fourth Wing is very similar, but that book has such like a more fun and less serious tone because they're literally riding dragons and like their dragons are having sex. So it's a bit like, okay, this is stupid and corny, but I'm having a good time. Whereas in this book, which has got some very serious topics and is a dystopia, it just kind of plays for like bad taste. Cause it's like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, he's a Nazi, but like I would, and that's annoying. And then eventually she like starts sleeping with him, but she's like, it's only going to be sex because you're Nazi and that's all it can be. She feels a lot of conflict about the relationship and when she takes it to that next level, which again mimics this broader theme of conflict and literally being in bed with the enemy and how confusing that becomes for her. But it lacks quite a lot of emotional impact because their connection is so shallow for most of the book. It very much is just physical sex, smut, sexual tension, sexual frustration. Have I said sex enough to get this video bombed in the algorithm? Probably. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be the fun police. I just think there's a time and place tonally. And I'm not even saying that there can't be sex scenes in the book. We can have sex scenes, but I want to see this genuine connection and this genuine romance and friendship form alongside the sex. I know the whole enemies to lovers thing is like good for the sexual tension. I'm just not quite sure that it gives the right message here. I think it works way better in an actual romantasy, not a dystopian, whatever we're calling it. Romantic dystopian. Don't know. We need to come up with a better term. I think what I want is like more emotional connection and yearning between the characters before they finally get it on, rather than just physical chemistry. I just think for me that even like works better. That's more entertaining. That's more of what I like. I think if they're just like having sexual tension and getting on, it just feels too much like a porno. It's like, oh, he's your military officer and he's so stern, and then you backtalk him, and then this whole scene plays out. It feels like the plot is there to support the smut rather than the smut being there to support the plot, which is the way it should be for a good book, in my opinion. And it just does nothing for me when it's the other way around. And I'm sick of all of these men getting described in the same way. Like they're all white with like dark hair and blue eyes, and they're tall and they're muscled and they've got tattoos. And that's just what they all look like. That's what Xaden looks like. That's what Rysand looks like. There's so many other romantasy books that I've not read that probably look this way. Can we get some diversity, please? I know some of them are like tawny skinned or tanned or whatever, and they try to argue that they are people of colour, but they're still described very white or very ambiguously. No one doubles down to like really make sure that the reader knows that they are definitely a different race. And it's not even about the race, it's literally just about them being tattooed, muscled, 6 foot plus, when really men are all different shapes and sizes and have a lot of diversity. And actually, can we just have some descriptions about their character for a change rather than like what they look like? Because what I like in a romantic interest in a novel is for them to be an interesting, well-rounded character, not just for them to like look a certain way. Like I don't even have an overly visual imagination for like faces and what people look like. I'm so much better able to visualize a person when they have like actual qualities, actual personality traits and flaws, and just are well developed and well rounded. Like I want them to feel like a real person and not some sort of AI generated hot man. Speaking of AI generated, a lot of people online kind of theorize that this book is AI generated. I didn't get that impression. I see why they might think that because it is a very generic book. The world building isn't very strong. The romance isn't particularly original. The plot itself isn't particularly original. It does feel like a rip-off of literal Fourth Wing and Divergent. So it could be AI generated, like maybe there was AI used to make the plan or to make the outline for the book, make the structure. But I do think it was written or at least edited pretty fully. I felt like the book was very formulaic within the ups and downs and with certain plot twists and reveals, but it did feel like a real person wrote it to me. Maybe I'm just not up to date with how good AI has gotten, but I don't think AI is that good yet. And I do think the book was coherent and written like reasonably well. Like it wasn't literary fiction or anything, but it was fine. It made sense. I have a problem with the content, but there was nothing like wrong with it necessarily from a craft point of view. It was just normal and fine. The only thing I really did to hate about the writing was the swearing in this. So she always says like hell fucking or god fucking as the curse. And it's just like, just use one or the other, or maybe come up with a swear word that's unique to your world, maybe. It just felt like the author was like, okay, to instill a bit of culture in a sense that this is a real place, I'm going to have a different custom around swearing. And what that custom is going to be is instead of saying, oh God, or oh hell, or oh fuck, they're just going to say, what in the god fucking hell is this? Or what are you hell fucking doing? Like, it's just, oh, it wasn't good. Can't There's nothing wrong with like fucking hell. Fucking hell works as a swear. You don't need to swap it to hell fucking. That just, what does that even mean? Does it mean anything? Are you fucking hell? It's just, if you're going to put that little effort in, like, don't bother, hun. And who is Dani Francis? Everyone's got theories about who Dani Francis is because it seems to be a pen name, and there's rumours that it's a super like famous other author, like maybe Elsie Silver or Colleen Hoover or something like that. I think this seemed like a bit better than a Colleen Hoover novel, so I don't think it's Colleen Hoover. I've not read any Elsie Silver, so I don't know, but it does seem like it could be a contemporary romance author that is very popular, that is trying a different genre. I don't think it would be Emily Henry because she can do much better than this. I heard someone say it's J.K. Rowling because she's super cancelled, and like, hell no, this is not J.K. Rowling. Say what you want about her, but she can write better than this drivel. And she would just never write something like this. Plus, she's already got Robert Galbraith as a pseudonym. And she's very good at writing mystery, like, that's what she's writing under the Robert pseudonym. I think if it was her, like, there would have been a really good formulaic mystery with lots of twists in here, which there wasn't. So it's definitely not her. Sorry to disappoint you. But if you have any other theories on who it might be, leave them in the comments because I'm curious and I don't really have any theory of my own, to be honest. And finally, just to address like the whole Hunger Games of it all, please can people stop comparing this to the Hunger Games? That is such an insult to the Hunger Games. It's so much better. It's an actual real dystopia that has a lot to say, but with a really good romance and love story in it as well that really informs the broader themes. And it's just a masterpiece from a craft level, from a tone level. It's really tasteful, really impactful emotionally, has a lot to say about war and about culture. Apparently, when asked about motivations for writing this novel, Dani Francis said she wanted it to be like the Hunger Games, but with like just more sex in it, which just kind of shows that she's missing the fucking point of the Hunger Games and why people were really into that in the first place. Which just kind of tells you everything you need to know about Silver Elite. and it's just really sad to hear. It really does feel like this book has been written to chase the trend because new adult romantasy is such a big trend. We've had less of it within a dystopian setting for good reason, I think, because it's a bit distasteful and it isn't as entertaining as something with dragons in it or fae or anything cool like that. I'm begging everyone, can we please keep dystopia a genre that has something important to say and remains political? I have no issue with romance being in dystopia. I think romance can play a big role in dystopia. I'm writing romance into mine. The Hunger Games has romance in it. What I don't want is smut in my dystopia. It just feels bad taste. Like, I'm sure there's some sickos out there, but for the majority of people, you wouldn't watch a porno set in like a prison camp or Nazi Germany, would you? And if you would, go get some help, please. I want romance within dystopia to be about humanity and love and hope and like bringing some lightness into a book that's just full of darkness and softening the edges somewhat, or even making the edges harder because you suddenly care about the characters and what happens to them and don't want to see horrible things happening to them because it makes you warm to them and it makes you root for them. I think that's the role that romance can play in order to make these stories better. I think you can also use romance in the way that George Orwell does in 1984, where you've got Julia and Winston having a relationship, talking about revolutionary things, and in the end, they betray each other in order to conform to the system. And it's very dark and very bleak, but also says a lot about humanity and is just a gut punch, really, and has a lot of emotional impact. And you really feel that betrayal because of the connection that they did have. So I think that's another way that romance can be used to further the broader plot of a dystopia. All that being said, let me know some of your favourite dystopias to read instead of Silver Elite. Let me know what you thought of Silver Elite. I'm not shaming people, by the way, who did enjoy this and did like the smut. I don't quite like it in dystopia, but each to their own. I think it was written to be enjoyed, so if you enjoyed it, it's not your fault. I more have a problem with the author writing it in the first place in order to be titillating within that kind of spectrum of topics. But if you like that, it's not your fault. It was literally made to be liked in that kind of way, you know? So don't worry, we're still friends. And I didn't like hate it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I gave it like 2.5 stars. And that was probably quite generous. There were parts of the books that I quite liked and thought had potential. But I don't think I'll be reading the second one. Let's put it that way. If you like this video, like it, subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos every week. Might not do every week in the run up to Christmas. I'm like really behind on my video making, but we shall see. Follow me on Instagram as well at Corinne's Literate. I need to post on there more. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!